Okay, so
Yes.
I'm here with Stanley Krippner. We're in Manhattan, in New York City, and I've had the pleasure of being invited to talk to Stanley a little bit. The last time we spoke was in our email correspondence regarding my latest article on Otto Rank, Embracing the Ambivalence, and you were kind enough to provide some comment. We will be discussing further today.
Oh my God. What a profound article that was.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good heavens, we really covered the waterfront in that article.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you read the other one I wrote as well recently, The Problems of the Beyond.
Yes.
Yeah. And now I got a third one coming out, which is called The Realm Between.
Oh.
Which goes into my concept of the therapeutic third more thoroughly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad I made the comments in print so you have a record of them. Yes.
I think we both needed that today.
Yeah.
It's very hot in New York and it's humid.
Sure.
I've had a long day. I was just at the Bion conference, giving a presentation today, as I just mentioned, on David Bohm and the isomorphism really between David Bohm and Wilfred Bion, which is a super interesting subject.
Yes, it's a quite remarkable combination.
I know, yes. I think that's why I'm so exhausted. Do you have any thoughts why Otto Rank has been so neglected? I was just mentioning that Winnicott mentions him in one paper in 1949. Bion mentions him once in 1975 in one of his lectures in Los Angeles. Klein never mentioned him, as far as I know.
As I look back on my graduate work, I think Rank was mentioned once.
Yeah, okay.
And not in a negative way, but just, that he was an important pioneer in psychoanalysis.
Yes, very important.
Came up with the birth trauma theory, and that was about it. I remember a massive textbook that I read for the course. It dealt very well with Freud, Jung, and Adler. No chapters on Rank. Now that I think of it. Yeah. Good heavens.
Ferenczi was also separated from Freud.
Yes.
He's mentioned much more than Rank as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, all these four were actually, in dispute with Freud. But Rank is the one that has been sort of erased. And he was so important with the whole ontological psychoanalysis, I think. And in transpersonal psychology, I know that Grove is mentioning him in Beyond the Brain in that book.
Yes. This is very timely because when I get back, I'll be co-authoring a book on the history of transpersonal psychology. Oh my God. It's really sad for the state of affairs in the history of psychotherapy because Otto Rank was such a great pioneer, and I think that there might be a couple of reasons. Mm-hmm. For one thing, Freud, Jung, and Adler were such domineering forces, and the conflict among their points of view and among their followers really left little room for anybody else. I would be very happy if Rank were added to the list, the four great psychoanalytic pioneers. Mm. I think that one of the reasons is that Rank did not write something that became a mainstream of public discourse. Also, Freud, with all of his logical and illogical flaws, was a very good writer. And I think this is one reason that Freud caught on, because his concepts could be easily understood. Jung, on the other hand, far more complex, did not write in English, took a while for his work to be translated and for people to become aware of his work. I think now, years after his death, Jung is probably a more commanding presence than ever.
Mm.
And then Adler was a fine writer. And ironically, the problem here is that his concepts were just so much common sense, they didn't create a lot of controversy the way that Freud's did. And when Rank came out with his birth trauma theory and his repression theory, that just couldn't compete with what Freud wrote about sex. It just was sort of a conceptual overload, sad to say. And another issue, if I recall correctly, Rank didn't have a lot of followers who wrote about his work. Now, Adler had a small coterie, and the Adlerian psychologists in the Adlerian Society is still going strong. They just had an annual convention a few weeks ago. And needless to say, Jung and Freud have numerous people still commenting on their work. So, Rank unjustly sort of got squeezed out. Having a fourth commanding presence was probably too much for the society at that time, especially the psychology of psychiatrists and psychologists, to take into account. For the same reason, Adler got bypassed unnecessarily, because Freud and Jung were such commanding figures. Yes, I think that people like you are needed to bring Rank's work back into discourse so it gets the attention it deserves, because there's so much in his work that can still be mined and read and understood with great advantage, especially from our current perspective.
Yeah.
Good heavens. And then, when he started to write about sexual repression and its impact on society, again, I think that was too much for the time to really assimilate well. It's ironic that Reich and his outlandish organ theory, far more outrageous than Rank, but he attained, arguably, much greater attention. And, of course, ended up a very sad case. At least we can't say the same thing for Rank. I think that when you get into some of the topics that Rank was championing and pioneering, you run into some knee-jerk reactions from conventional thinkers, especially at that time. And I think that now is a much better climate for some of his ideas to be rethought and represented in the way that you and others are doing.
No, it makes sense, and Robert Kramer was mentioning that somewhere, that Rank was almost a century ahead of his time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Why do you think we are more susceptible to rank now in psychology?
Well, like I mentioned in my email to you, I think that a couple of things are operating. Stanislav Grof's work has gotten a great deal of visibility, a great deal of attention. And of course, he puts a lot of emphasis upon the various varieties of birth, which is very much in alignment with Rank's birth trauma theory.
Mm.
And so I think that Rank's work sort of clears the way for a reconsideration of Rank's work. I think that Rank's work is probably much more complex. But again, his attention to the various types of birth and birth and labor difficulties is sort of in alignment with the more overall generalization of birth trauma that Rank came up with. So I think that this is one aspect of it all. Also, there's a lot in Rank's work that is in alignment with some of the research and concepts being held now in creativity theory, especially the notion of the daimon, the DAIMON, the creative spark, the inner monitoring. It's something that one runs into when one reads the autobiographies of creative people. They don't use the word, but you read the personal statements, you think, well, there's that diamond at work again. And again, creativity theory in research is fairly recent. It only goes back a couple of decades, long after Rank's day, that creativity began to be researched seriously. Remember that Freud thought that creativity was sublimation. That was too simplistic. And those days are now, again, a germ of truth there, but not much, in the past. So, again, a new development resonates with some of Rank's work. Also, I think that, if I remember correctly, Rank's discussion of will and intention is now in alignment with what is going on in existential psychology, existential psychotherapy, and existential psychiatry. So again, this is something that came about long after Rank had made his original contributions. And then transpersonal psychology, and I felt that this was an important concept to bring into the discussion of your essay. That resonates also with some of Rank's work. So it's like these four major developments in psychology, psychiatry, and psychotherapy are sort of resonating with the echoes of Rank's work. So I think now his time has come all these years later. And what needs to be done now is more conferences, more publications, in more presentations so that he's never forgotten again. Now remember, I'm not an expert on Rank, and at my stage of life, my memory is not the best, and so I'm sure I've left out a lot of his ideas that are pertinent to our discussion. But that gives a general outline.
Your memory seems pretty good. Very good.
Yes.
And it's also very different reading the later Rank from the early Rank. But also Rank does not give much in terms of, he leaves it quite open. How do we actually use his work therapeutically? He leaves that quite open. One problem with Rank is that it's quite cryptic. You have to really dig into his work and, structure it so that it's digestible for people. But I do notice that there's a great interest in his thought, which is very positive because it gives us some hope for psychology, I think.
Psychoanalysis is not as dominant a force as it used to be. There's a psychodynamic psychotherapy is now being practiced. It's not a surprise that they are neglecting Rank. They're sort of fighting to hold on to their turf. I think that this is why the interest in Rank comes from these other fields of psychology, psychiatry that I mentioned. And to bring Bohm into the picture, the concept of the explicit and the implicit order is something that really can tie into psychotherapy.
Yes.
He was not a therapist himself, but you can see the connection there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Good heavens.
Yeah, you can, because one super important, probably the most important aspect of therapy is the tacit dimension, right?
The tacit dimension.
Yeah.
The tacit dimension, that ties in very nicely with what psychotherapists do, sure.
Yeah.
Talk about the third element in psychotherapy.
That's the third element, yeah.
There you have it.
Yeah, because Bohm is very clear that since everything sort of is generated from this tacit ground, everything, all the changes also are supported from the tacit ground. So thought, for example, is projected from the tacit ground, so change in thought must occur in the tacit process between us. So people sometimes think Bohm is very cognitive or neuropsychological, but I actually think he's quite dynamic.
Sure.
Yeah, existential. Can you talk a little bit more about how you understand that? And how would you relate it to the implicate order?
Well, remember, I'm not a psychotherapist and I'm not an expert on the tacit dimension, but as I understand it, when you have a client and a therapist working together, there's a lot going on that is not obvious on the surface. Not even the psychotherapist knows everything that's going on. And the client and the therapist are making connections on a deeper level, an almost unconscious level, that is not at the time apparent to either of them. In retrospect, especially the therapist said, oh my God, this is what was going on. I'll use this in the next section. Well, that's what I consider the tacit dimension. The unspoken dimension of psychotherapy that nonetheless is very, very important.
Yeah.
Now, one puzzle I have, as you're well aware, cognitive behavioral psychotherapy is probably the most widely used therapy in the United States today.
Yeah.
And I suspect that the tacit dimension is also operating there. Even though it's not talked about, it's not acknowledged. But when you have two people working together in a therapeutic relationship, this tacit dimension is bound to appear. I would say that this probably goes on even in intimate relationships that are not therapeutic, between lovers, between close friends. There's a tacit dimension going on. Connections are being made at an unconscious level.
Yeah.
And again, I see this now as bringing in Bohm's work, and why Bohm's work is so important in this whole triage that you've been working with.
Yeah.
God, the more we talk about it, the more interesting it gets. Yeah. Even though my knowledge is so fragmentary on these topics.
I don't know about that. But Bohm is actually, he does comment, as you know, on psychotherapy.
Yes, also keep in mind that both Freud and Bohm, and even more so Jung, were sympathetic to the notion of telepathy and telepathic connections being made.
Yeah.
Jung, of course, more than anybody.
Yeah.
But even Freud was, and certainly Bohm was sympathetic to that. He wrote an article for the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research that brought his point of view into that framework. So, my question is, how did you ever put those three people together? That is such a great intellectual achievement.
Yeah.
Well, how did you come to that?
And like I said, I do need some vacation now. I noticed because it's been some 5 years of brain exercise. But no, like I said this morning, I came to Bion actually, back to Bion through Otto Rank and Bohm. So it's a development. Yeah. There's conceptual similarities between Bohm and Rank. It's easier applying Bohm's principles in therapy through Bion's work. I think that's why Bion is quite interesting, because it seems like he's been working with a lot of the same principles. Surprisingly so. Surprisingly so. And there's not much links drawn between these two theorists. But he's more clear. He's a clearer author. He's got a more structured theory. So he's a pathway to bringing Rank alive again. How did you get into all this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm co-authoring a book with Harris Friedman in Nicholas Boving.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Let's not talk about that, because that book is getting to be so humongous.
Yeah.
We're running into more material as it all goes on.
Oh my
it's
God.
Important. The other article I'm co-authoring also involves creativity. It's for a book on rhythm. And again, I'm co-authoring that because I'm past the time that I can do all of this advanced writing independently. But we're bringing in rhythm from music, and they wanted our chapter to especially bring in shamans and drumming and percussion. So that would be sort of a original contribution. And my friend Mickey Hart, the percussionist for the Grateful Dead, now has a television series called Rhythm. He's interviewing sports figures about how rhythm is so important in their work.
Of the body. Mm.
So, so I keep plugging away on these writing projects. What did I say? It keeps my mind active. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're working a lot still.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Even though it's slow going, I keep plugging away.
Are you enjoying it?
Oh, good heavens, yes. Yes, it is.
And if you would stop?
What?
If you would stop, what do you think you would feel? That's a very leading question.
I'd be dead.
That's a leading question.
Yes.
You'd feel dead. Yeah.
Yes, I'd stop. I'd probably be dead because for better or for worse, my mind is working all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You've kept your mind very clear.
Oh, good heavens.
Very well functioning.
I try to keep my body in good shape, too.
Yeah.
Yes, on this trip.
Totally.
I have a walk over there. I haven't been able to use it once. Get all around with my cane.
Oh, yeah. It's fantastic. Are you doing like yoga? Or?
Yes. I do virtual yoga once a week on the computer. And then we set up a number of exercises I can follow up for the rest of the week.
Shamanism, transpersonal
It's all in my memoirs.
Yeah.
I told you about the Life magazine article.
They are here, the memoirs.
Yes.
Wow.
And
they're heavy.
I actually wrote too much. I would have preferred to write just one book and put the rest of it on electronic. There should have been a fourth book. There were 8 chapters left out of those.
Yes, a chaotic life. The memoirs.
Yes, they left out 8 chapters, much to my regret, but
they left out 8 chapters.
Yeah, 8 chapters in my life.
Yeah.
My parents, my sister, my high school years, my graduate studies, all of that was left out. But the 8 chapters are available in the electronic version, which I recommend that people buy for $60. It's more complete and less expensive.
Thank you so much. It was lovely talking to you.
Oh, I'm so glad you were able to make the trip over here. If you come to California, remember I'm in Sacramento. Should we be able to make the trip that far?
That's a couple of hours from LA or driving?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll try to think of other ways we can do Wrong some justice. And now that we've made connections, we'll see what we can do.
I'm glad we have him now. We still have his books. He's made himself immortal.
Yes.